Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and you want to know about how we're helping other accredited investors keep more of their income, go to firstgencp.com/going long.
You know, we're used to things like saving is a virtue, right? Like saving money is a good thing, right? Well, right now, saving is actually bad. The more you save, the more you lose. And actually, you guarantee your losses, right? I mean, it's between 8%, which 8 or 9% is what they say in the US. The inflation is, I think it's much higher in Europe.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Go Along Podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I am your host, Billy Keels, and I'm really looking forward to welcome you back to this conversation because this one is a keeper. You got to make sure you listen to this one once or twice. Check it out. Listen, everybody, I just want to continue to say thank you so much for continuing to leave your honest written reviews, your ratings, also for plastering social media with screenshots. Really, really appreciate that and tagging us. It's awesome, especially when you do that on LinkedIn. It's absolutely fantastic. If you haven't left your honest written review or a rating yet, feel free to do that. All you need to do, we've even made a little video for you if you want to do that on the Apple podcast platform or on Spotify. Make it really, really simple. And then also too, for everyone that wants to check out previous episodes from the very beginning, you can even go back to episode #1. Check me out there, which is absolutely pretty amazing. Go to firstgencp.com/podcasts. Once again, it's firstgencp.com/podcasts. And listen, today's conversation, like I said, it's a keeper. You're going to want to make sure you check this one out. We have, everyone who is a high-paid professional, especially if you've been in the medical sales industry and you've made that transition from high-paid professional and you're looking to make the transition or you're making it and you're just looking for some more ways as to how you can continue to add value. We've got an amazing guest today, Mr. Bronson Hill, and he's going to share his insights with you, and you're going to get to that just after this. Are you a busy high-paid professional? Someone that in the previous 2 years has earned $200,000 and is expected to earn $200,000 this year? Or maybe if you filed jointly, previously you've earned $300,000 the previous 2 years and you're also expected to do that this year. Or maybe if not, either individually or jointly, you have $1 million in net worth, not including your primary residence. If you meet any of these criteria, then you're someone that the IRS considers to be an accredited investor. That probably means you're someone like an enterprise software sales executive. You may be an executive in a major corporation. You may be a doctor. You may be a lawyer, maybe a high-paid consultant. You may even work for a major sports franchise. The thing I know you have in common is that you continue to do the hard work. Like you're doing 100% of the work and you're only bringing home 50% of the reward because you continue to get crushed by your income taxes. If you are tired of this situation and you're looking for a new solution, then go to firstgencp.com/going long. When you get there, that's going to help you to start the journey so that you can begin to take back control of your taxes, take control of your time. And then also that means you're going to be able to spend more of the time that you want with the people that you love the most. And that is the way that you're going to get the personal freedom that you're looking for. So if you're looking to take back control, go ahead and go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. So you know what? If you've ever wanted to know what it means to go from medical sales success to multifamily phenomenon and beyond, then guess what? Today's a conversation you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Because listen, today's guest not only was a high-performing medical sales rep, and he did that across multiple disciplines. He's going to talk to us a little bit about that. He also began his real estate investing career, or let's call it real asset investing career, back in 2006. Today, he's also a business coach and syndication coach. He is wonderfully engaging personality, and he has the ability to assemble thought leaders to discuss really amazing current topics. And I really want him to talk to us more about how he does that. He is the host of the super popular podcast, The Mailbox Money Show, and he also has his own multifamily meetup in the Pasadena, California area. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation the managing member of Bronson Equity, Mr. Bronson Hill. Bronson, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Billy, man, that was quite an intro. I feel like I need to stand a little taller after hearing that. But man, I'm excited to be here with you, man. You're all the way from Barcelona, so I love it.
Yeah, man, this is awesome, and this is really going to be an amazing conversation. So much, I'm sure that the Go Along family is going to learn today. And yeah, man, this has been a long time coming. So here's the thing, though. I kind of want to get into your story. As you know, I kind of ask everybody at least the same 5 questions. You're going to get a lot more than 5 questions, by the way, Bronson. You're going to get 2 in the beginning. You're going to get 3 in the end, because we want the Going Long family to get to know more about you. And the first question is, help us understand, where is it that you call home in the U.S.?
So I am from Seattle, but I live in Los Angeles, so Pasadena, California.
All right, fantastic. Out on the left coast, appreciate that. And then the other thing is, I love positivity. I happen to know you really love positivity as well. So help us understand, what's the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
Okay, so something happened today, and I'm really excited about it. I am like a total kind of health hacker, biohacker kind of guy, and I've been doing ice baths for years, which I enjoy. It's where you literally involve sitting in a tub full of ice and feeling like you're going to die, but then afterwards, when you're done, you feel amazing. So I actually created a cold plunge at my house, and I've just got notice on my phone that it's at 38 degrees this morning. So I'm going to try to jump in today. 38 degrees. I'm going to post that on my channel on social media. So I'm pretty excited. So maybe if you come to LA, Billy, you can jump in the cold plunge too.
All right. Hey, you know what? I've seen you and Kevin Hart do that. So I think it's pretty amazing.
I'm sure Kevin Hart would be a little funnier than mine. Oh my gosh, I'm going to die.
No, and one of the other things I know about you, you're not going to try and do it. I'm sure you're absolutely going to do it. And you've already said you're going to be sharing that across social media. So that would be absolutely fantastic. So here's the thing, Bronson, and I know we know one another a little bit, but I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I try to do things sometimes that are, sometimes some people would say are not even possible. Sort of like trying to tell your entire backstory in 1.5 seconds. That was never, ever going to happen, right? So here's what I'd love for you to do. If you could help me out as a guest today, as our special guest, is if you could share your backstory in your own words. And then also too, if you could help me out just a little bit, Bronson, could you also talk to us about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey? And then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Yeah. So kind of like you shared, I was a well-paid medical sales professional. I know sales professionals can get paid very well. And I was making, not as well as some, but, over $200K a year. I was working about 30 hours a week or less. And I enjoyed what I did. I was a President's Club guy. 4 out of 8 years I was eligible. So I worked really hard. I really took pride in being a great sales guy. But then I started to learn about real estate. I just thought, the one thing I don't have is I don't have financial freedom. I'm not making enough money to really live well in LA. Even it's funny, $200K is not enough money to live really well in LA, but at least by the standard I like to live. And then also, I didn't have control over my time. And I think when people say, I want financial freedom, really what they're saying is I want to have more control over my time. If you really break it down, is a lot of people are doing the time for money trade. And I even saw this with physicians that were making, millions of dollars a year, literally, but they were working 60 or 80 hours a week. And so the ability to get control over your time was huge. So what I did is I started buying single family houses. I thought, hey, real estate will be the way. I bought 4 or 5 houses. I realized, man, this is a lot of work. Thought I was going to get to 30. I have a relative who does multifamily who said, hey, why are you doing all this single family stuff? Why don't you do multifamily? And I said, well, I'd love to, but I don't have the money. And he said, well, you can raise the money. He taught me about syndication. He said, go to this event, listen to this podcast, read this book. I did everything he said. And there's a few things happen along the way. And now I've raised 30 million. I left my job about 1.5 years ago. And I just love what I'm doing. I've actually have my 6th international trip coming up. Later this month, I'm going to Patagonia. And next month, actually, I guess in January, I'm going to come see you, hopefully in Barcelona. So that'll be great. So I'm excited.
There we go. Listen, man. So that sounds absolutely fantastic. So many things I'm sure so much of the Going Long family can relate to, right? You talked about high paid sales. We tend to have a lot of sales people or sales leaders or corporate leaders that are here and in a different space, but in the IT space. I recently was telling people that there's a website called RepView, and it talked about IT sales, software sales professionals specifically, and they're earning top earners at $1.2 million, right? So that's just it's just one of these things that sometimes if you're not in the space, it's difficult to understand. But yeah, I mean, we can definitely relate to the things that you're talking about. But one of the things that you were on this trek, right? You were going to do your single family, and then you got a family member that helped to open your eyes to this new space. But what was it about the real estate asset that initially caught your attention? Because you knew you didn't want to keep doing the time for money, but why was it that versus, I don't know, something else?
I think there's a number of things. I think everybody that I know that has done well over time and has a lifestyle that I'd really admire, almost all of them did real estate. And so I watched, this cousin of mine who he just had all the time in the world. He could do whatever he wanted. Be traveling a lot. I was like, man, there's something about that. What is it about? And I think there's something in my mind that thought maybe single family would be a way to start. And that's where most people start. But I realized over time, most people don't achieve financial freedom through single family. So I think for me, it was just basically getting, watching people that are doing it, learning, getting around people. There's this saying that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And so I started to get around people that were just doing things differently. And I think that's really where a lot of learning happens. When you're around physicians or you're around IT people or whatever you're around, you kind of get the flavor of what they do. And medical people in general, they would, whether they're physicians or they worked at a company that sold stuff like I did, basically they would be, get no vacation. I think, like 2 weeks a year, maybe 3 weeks a year, be kind of intermittent, whatever. And they just didn't have a lot of time freedom. So, I realized I needed to kind of try to find a way to do something different. I just had all these ideas in my head of things I wanted to create. And I just knew I wasn't going to be able to do it by staying with that job.
Makes a lot of sense, and really having that focus on the time freedom aspect and being able to see and understand where other people have been able to create their time freedom, and that is what moved you in that direction, which makes a lot of sense. And then I know as we're here also too talking about investing and investing long distance in real assets. I tend to think that it's a pretty, or at least it used to be, it was a pretty contrarian kind of way. Like most of the books that I read said, hey, listen, if you're going to be a landlord, make sure that you're within the 1 hour rule or something like that, and you can go see things and do things. Well, as you know, I live in Barcelona, and I've almost over a decade while I was working my day job, I was investing in different types of real assets, always back in the United States. So this whole thing about investing long distance seemed very contrarian. A lot of people said, why would you do that? Don't do this, don't do that. I also happen to know, well, you're out in California, and I know that the company, your company, you've invested in a number of different locations that don't happen to be California. It's extremely contrarian, and I know sometimes it can scare a lot of people. So I always want to know, why in the world did you decide, and what gave you the confidence to be able to invest beyond your backyard to a different location that could be, maybe even thousands of miles away?
Yeah. So we have a mutual friend, Robert Helms, who says this, live where you want and invest where the numbers make sense. And I don't know that I'd necessarily choose California to live. There's a lot of crazy politics and a lot of crazy problems with a lot of things, but the weather's great. So we pay a lot for the weather. But I think for me, even when I was doing single family houses, we had 4 or 5 in the Cleveland area. And I basically learned kind of through a program or kind of a coach that you actually can do this remotely and how to build a team remotely. So that was actually really helpful. I haven't really thought about that, but it was a very transferable thing, right? You learn, you build a team in one place, and then it actually allows you to scale more. If I had to do everything, I watch people that do things themselves, and whether it's single family, small multifamily, whatever, and it's all within an hour or two, they've got to be the one that's literally driving to that property and doing everything themselves. For me, all of our stuff, we've got, about 1,500 units in Jacksonville, Florida now. We've got a 500 in Atlanta. Actually, we just sold one in Atlanta this last week. And so, I go to the property, I look at, things there, but I'm not the primary asset manager. I'm not the one who's running the show. Now we actually hired a full-time asset manager, right? So with one of my partners. So it's like, I have the ability to create conversations and information and content, and also passively invest and then bring investors, but I can do it from a distance and not have to be there regularly. Like I do go visit each property, but I'm not the one who's actually doing that. So the amazing thing about multifamily or a lot of these bigger investments is they involve team, right? There's a lot of team members. I know you've had team members all over. And so if you have a team member that you trust, you don't have to be the one who's out kicking doors, or I guess not kicking doors, but knocking on doors and making sure that actually these renovations are being done, or the manager managing the manager kind of on a week-to-week basis. But it is important you have team members there, and that takes trust. But then it allows me, just like a full-time passive investor or somebody who's fully passive, to basically have my life and not have to be the one who's actually managing an asset. So that's what I love. So I feel a commonality with a lot of our passive investors that I can participate in that as well.
Fantastic. So recognizing that, I'm just curious also to how much of that would you say can you attribute to being able to, like, having worked in a larger multinational and kind of seeing maybe how things work there? Because sometimes I know people think, wow, from California to Cleveland, even on a single family residence, that's amazing. I don't really see it's that big of a deal, but also because I came from a different environment. I'm just curious at how your corporate experience also was helping you even do things that were contrarian, quote unquote, from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of things that we're influenced by that, like, honestly, I didn't really thought about that, but you're right. I mean, we do meetings all over the country. We do, I have my own territory, but then when I would be out of town, somebody else would cover the area. You'd find a colleague to kind of cover medical procedures when you're gone, or you have other things, or you just tell them, hey, I'm sorry, I can't be there. Can you guys make it on your own, kind of thing. And so I think there's a lot of things I think people don't realize. This is where I think, especially for passive investors, is really helpful, is that we don't realize that, if we've had a business, we've been a professional, we've done various things, that basically those things all apply to real estate, right? We can bring strengths of being, strong in looking at numbers, evaluating information, all that stuff applies. Or maybe we're good at networking. And so that's a great skill when it comes to real estate. I know a guy that's a full-time passive investor. He just simply spends like most of his time. He's in like 70 deals passive, literally 70 deals. I think it sounds exhausting to me, but he loves it. But he spends most of his time just networking, trying to learn about new deals. And so again, there's these skills that we have that we learn in our professional life that we can totally bring to investing, which I love.
Yeah, which is absolutely fantastic. And that networking kind of aspect, I'd love for you to expand on that because, when I watch, and I think most of the people that have known of you, or if you're getting to know Bronson today, like one of the things that you make yourself and the things that you're doing and the way that you're serving others, very visible. I know networking is something that a lot of people talk about, but aren't necessarily understanding the power that can come from networking. I know that it happens to be one of your core strengths. And I'd love for you to expand on that just a little bit in terms of networking and how you see that as another ability to not only learn, but also serve others.
Yeah, so there's this saying that you'll be the same 5 years from now, except for the books you read and the people that you meet. So the idea is, there's two things that part of that. One is education, so learning new information, learning new skills, going to conferences, all that. And the second part of that is networking, right? So it literally change, like meeting somebody at an event has been transformational. For example, I met my first investor at a meetup I started in Los Angeles, right? And that was my first, I go from 0 to 1. That was huge. I became a general partner in a deal. He only invested $100K, but that was kind of got me going. 6 months later, I connected with a partner at an event that, this investor summit that you and I are familiar with. And basically I raised $15 million together with this person over the next 18 months. So meeting the right person can be absolutely transformational. So I do go to a lot of events. I go to 20, 25 events a year. People are like, oh my gosh, you travel too much. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I probably do travel too much. But something serendipitous always happens. So it doesn't have to be that you travel, but just like for yourself, you find a way to build a connection with somebody, to be able to have a conversation, to be able to connect. But I feel like there's a real amazing thing that happens, something magical when you're in the same room. You're talking with someone face to face. Some awesome doors can open up. And then, on social media, remember who's kind of an influencer building their business. Anytime I go to an event, I always post it on social media because I want to be seen as somebody who is a connector, somebody who knows folks and is kind of in different circles. And so that opens a lot of doors also. But it's kind of something that's developed, and I've been really enjoying it. But it's a good notice that you've picked up on that. So
yeah, absolutely, man. And it is one of those things. Sometimes it is just one or two relationships that can really change. Like you mentioned, you go from 0 to 1, and then that puts you on a different trajectory. And then you put yourself in, the whole thing of you travel too much. I think that's actually kind of interesting that someone would say that, but you travel what you want to travel, and you're able to develop those relationships and have new knowledge and things like that, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I actually, speaking of which, so we kind of talked about you getting out there and you're a connector. I also know that you happen to have a passion for the education side of things, right? At the very beginning, we talked about you as a syndication or as a mentor, and as a coach. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you have decided to kind of formalize that type of thing and help others to become the best versions of themselves in whatever discipline? Maybe if you want to drill down on that as well.
Yeah. So in my journey for financial freedom, I actually did some things on the side where I was working, and I actually became an investment advisor for a few years. I worked with some kind of alternative assets and Wall Street products. And I really got convinced that in general, Wall Street is just not out there looking for people's best interest, right? They will take fees. There's a book by Tony Robbins it's called Money Master the Game. It came out saying the average mutual fund will say their fees are 1.2%, but there's all these hidden fees they don't have to legally disclose. So the average fee actually is about 3.2%, which is hidden. It's not even disclosed. It's crazy. And the returns for the stock market typically are kind of in the, historically the 6 to 8% range. So that's like, a good majority of your money. And if you have an advisor, they take another 2%. So it's like all these fees add up. And I feel like people are just here. We're educated by firms that are really biased to help take fees from that. So I feel like it's really a mission that's really to help people become financially free. One is to get outside of Wall Street and into Main Street stuff. I know you're passionate about that as well. Yeah. And then secondly, it's really giving people financial education. I realized the biggest thing that helps people grow their wealth is financial education. Books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or other financial books, or things that really can just help people to understand how syndication works. When I first heard about syndication, I was like, what the heck is that? That sounds so weird. Everything sounds weird and it sounds foreign until you've done it or you met somebody who has done it. And so I think of a call I had with a physician who was worth, he had a medical practice worth $5 million. We'd asked about net worth. He's worth $5 million. He's only invested in stocks and bonds. And a lot of people have had that experience where they have a money guy or a money person and they just do everything for them. But the challenge is like, they can't get their head around really how alternative asset works. I have an investor now. We're just going back and forth. We have an ATM fund that we're doing now. And this person had some sort of fee-based financial advisor just said, I think you're making a big mistake. Whatever. He forwarded me the email this person said about these alternative investments. And I said, man, this guy, he's either not wealthy or he made his money while he was doing his business and not by investing this way. Like, it's just like this financial system, if you do the traditional way, it's set up to keep us poor and actually take incredible risks. So I could talk for a long time about that, but I think, again, it's just something that I see in our system that is totally backwards. And I think it's really a huge problem that most people have no idea that they're just at incredible risk, just sitting in these traditional assets.
Yeah. And so it comes a lot down to the passion that you have around something, right? When you recognize that these things are happening, you have the opportunity to continue to educate people, and you're doing that in a way that is through mentoring, coaching, so that you can help effectively allow people to have more time freedom, which is one of the things that we talked about from the very beginning. Trusting that you're enjoying today's conversation. And you know what? If you're tired of getting crushed by taxes and you're looking for greater freedom to be able to choose what you want to do when you want to do it, make sure that you go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. Let's get back to the conversation. Also, Bronson, you're a guy who's known to, you get out there and you want to make sure that you're also bringing in information and bringing in perspective, and perspective from some of the brightest minds that are out there that are talking about current events. I would love to, and I'll throw out some of the things. One of the things I appreciate about you is that you're constantly bringing thought leaders together to be able to talk about current events. And that could be in the area of precious metals. It could be current events. It could be maybe something specific like MultiFamily or something else in that way. Some people might scratch their head and go, how in the world is Bronson out there? And he's got Rick Rule on this thing, and he's got Russell Gray, and he's got Daniel DiMartino Booth, and these names that some people may recognize. Talk to us a little bit about kind of where did that start, and kind of how have you been able to build that momentum to be able to continue to help bring thought leaders together to continue to educate, because it goes back to your desire to educate others. And if you just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good notice, man. You're an insightful guy. I appreciate the questions. I think that, I've learned a lot from people that are much smarter than me. So I've always attempted to be the least smartest person in the room, right? So if I'm leading a panel with 3 other people, which we do once a month, our Bronson Equity Investor Series monthly. I try to bring together who are some of the brightest minds, who are some of the people that I respect. And I've asked for people that I've not gotten. I've gotten people that I'm really grateful I've gotten. Like Ken McElroy and some of the people you mentioned. And I love that. It's been amazing. It's developed some great relationships and friendships. But, first of all, I get to be in the room asking those questions, kind of moderating that. I think that's a skill to be able to moderate a panel. So I'm learning how to do that, even at live events. That's something I've seen for somebody who can moderate a panel, which is great. But to me, it's just about what's really happening. And again, you can watch hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos, but some of the best events I go to are ones that bring together some of the smartest minds, and they have conversations around things. And so, George Gammon says this, and then Chris Martenson says this over here, and Rick Rule says that. And it's just like, you get this synergy that you really can't get anywhere else, right? And somebody's like, well, yeah, I thought about that, but this, or, I agree with this, or you even see them kind of engaging with the ideas as well. How do we do this? So I think that it's something that it really does allow me to get better and me to get smarter. So now when I talk about things like inflation or financial stuff, which is really important, I think today, no matter where you live, that you're looking at not just real estate or not just one asset class, you're looking at macroeconomics. Because if you're doing that back in 2006, 2008, especially in the US, you would have lost your shorts. And we know some people that have lost a lot or lost everything during that time. So paying attention to what is happening, I think right now is so, so important. So I think, the reason we do it is, again, to help try to add value. And again, what I get, it's kind of selfish as well, because I get to get all these people in the room. I learned a ton. And then I think we had about 100 people live, 105 people live. And it was just we had a great conversation, and people are interacting and they're asking questions, and it's just a lot of fun. So I feel like those events, they used to be really nerve wracking. Oh my gosh, I'm leading this thing with all these people and I've got 100 people live, and it felt like a lot, but now it feels like it's a lot of fun because I get to be a part of that and I get to really add value there.
Well, and it's great, right? Because you are having fun, and that comes through. You are adding value because you're helping to educate, and you're also bringing sometimes converging points of view on a topic, which I think is a very healthy thing, so that you can continue to help allow individuals or allow people to come up with draw their own conclusions. But I do want to draw, because one of the things that you said, and I hope everyone here heard what Bronson said. He said that yes, for each person that he does get, there are other people that he doesn't get. And that doesn't keep him from continuing to ask, right? Because if we don't ask, and this probably, you and I both come from a sales background, sales leadership background, it's just the norm. So just because you see all the accolades, there are things that, maybe not every single person has been a guest with you yet, but I'm sure they will be very soon.
Well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I think with Wayne Gretzky said that, right? It's just like in anything, whether it's you're going for a job or you're trying to get the sale or you're asking somebody or dating or, if you don't ask the girl out, you're never going to find your soulmate, right? It's just not going to happen. So it's the same thing with this. It's just, that's the exact same.
Absolutely. So you know what, I'm going to take a page from your book, because you mentioned something that I think is very important, especially nowadays, right? Is the topic of inflation. I know you've also come up with, you've written about the topic of inflation and how you can actually use inflation, which some people would think, well, hang on a second, you can actually use it to your advantage. Well, what does that absolutely mean? I don't even understand that. It seems like it makes me want to scratch my head. You've spent a lot of time on this topic. Love for you to help maybe paint the picture as to, how can you use an inflationary environment to your advantage?
Yeah, well, I did write an ebook on this, it is a download at my website, how to use inflation to your advantage, 50 color pages, all kinds of strategies there. But I think really the conversation now is a lot of people, this is a different environment than we've ever really been through, right? Most of us have not been investors in the late 70s, early 80s. And myself included. And so, we're used to things like saving is a virtue, right? Like saving money is a good thing, right? Well, right now, saving is actually bad. The more you save, the more you lose. And actually, you guarantee your losses, right? I mean, it's between, 8%, which, 8 or 9% is what they say in the US. The inflation is, I think it's much higher in Europe, even the inflation is much higher. But if you look at the unofficial numbers, like shadow stats, it says it's more like 15 to 18%. So if that's the case, if you wait the next couple of years, which the confused mind will say, I'm just going to wait. Things look kind of scary. I'm going to wait. And so people wait, and you could be losing 35 to 40% of your purchasing power. Now, your money doesn't go away. You still have your money, but what it buys is worth less. So I'm trying to get about 95% invested my net worth into different deals because of the inflation hedge that's built in. So a couple of quick strategies on how to do that. Real estate obviously is a pretty easy one. If inflation is here, we see rents and inflation go hand in hand. I could pull up a chart from the 1960s. It shows a trend line between here's what inflation is and here's what rents are. Rents lag slightly, but it's almost a complete correlation. So we know rents are going up. They're going to continue to go up, especially in the US. We see such a demand for apartments, but short between 3 and 8 million apartment units. We know that's going to happen. And the amazing thing about real estate is as the value of those or the cost of those rents go up, that's how much these properties are worth. It's not like a comp with single family where it's like, oh, this house sold for this much. And it's based on, it's what's the house valued across the street or the sale down the block. It's basically how much income is being produced in the property. So if we know rents are going to be higher, the values are going to be significantly higher in 5 to 10 years. So by taking out good debt, we're taking out debt at 6, 7, 8%, really, I think below the true rate of inflation. And you only need a 20% increase in the value of your property to typically double the value of your investment, right? If you put 20 to 30% down, the value of the property goes up by 20, 30%, you've doubled your equity. You haven't had a 20, because you're using leverage. So to me, there's so many benefits of real estate. There's tax advantage. There's all kinds of stuff that it allows you to really use other people's money, get into great assets we know long-term are going to be worth more, and you get to pay them off with future dollars that are going to be worth less, right? Because the dollar's being devalued. We know that's going to continue. So anyway, that's just one part of it, but I think that's something a lot of people need to hear. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you giving us a very concrete example and helping us to once again understand how, and just because we hear about inflationary environment, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And how does that affect your specific situation? And you've talked to us about one specific kind of asset area. Some would say asset class, right, in real estate, and how that can be used as an advantage against inflation. One other thing, and I guess, did you want to build on that? Was there something else you wanted to add? I think just the idea right now these days is just buying real assets, buying things that are physical, tangible. Our friends, the real estate guys, kind of got me introduced to physical precious metals. And so I've started buying metals, and there's value. You can actually borrow against the value of that. So instead of holding cash, sometimes I'll hold gold and silver in a third party vault, and then you can borrow against the value of that. And you can basically use it almost like a HELOC or a home equity line of credit. So there's all kinds of strategies you can do. But I do think that, real estate or assets that pay you to hold them, cash flowing assets within an inflation hedge are huge.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that and it was a kind of a paradigm shift for me, because I always used to think, okay, well, yeah, I want to have as much liquidity as possible. Well, then sometimes then I got to a certain point, it was like about how do I actually have the assets that can provide me liquidity? Because there is a strength in that as well, right? It's not always just about having liquidity. And I love you using the example of having precious metals and being able to borrow against that, because effectively you are leveraging an asset to be able to access liquidity. One other thing that I do want to just kind of ask you about, Bronson, before we get into the going long final three, is you've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of time speaking to a number of passive investors. I think it's probably well over 1,200, 1,300, maybe even more than that. I'm sure it's over that at this point in time, and also helping to educate them. But maybe what are some of the things that you have learned after speaking to so many different passive investors and the things that they are also looking for? I know you touched on some of it at the top, but just want to talk to that experience that you've had.
Yeah. So in speaking, with it's been over 1,300 investors. It's been an opportunity to interview a bunch of millionaires, right? What do these people do? What are their habits? I think a few things really impress me. One is that they take time to have a 20, 30-minute call to learn about investments. They're actually taking the time to do that and to educate themselves and learn about different investments. And so I thought that's really interesting. And then again, a lot of these people have turned a corner where it's gone from hey, I'm going to go buy a rental house. A lot of times, I'll meet a physician. In my background, working with physicians. Oh yeah, I have a rental house, or I've got a vacation property, I got whatever. And the challenge I always ask everybody in that situation, I was like, if you were to 10x your investment, would it take up more of your time? Could you do it? With your schedule, it's like, well, I work too much, whatever. It's like, well, then you're not really having passive income. I don't think a rental house, even if you have a manager, even if you have a vacation rental, those are not necessarily passive strategies. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that if you really want to get to a place where you're developing, you have a lot of wealth, and you're saying, how can I actually, get all these investments going to where I could double my money in 5 years, or I could have just a process to grow money outside of my business or outside of my profession. And that's what a lot of people don't have. And that's the thing that I think I really hope and I pray and I desire and I just contend for with people. Really, it's because it's a transformation. When somebody goes from they've never invested in a passive deal, they invest in one of our deals or somebody else's deals, and then the light goes on. They put 50 or 100K in a deal. They're seeing the cash flow and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And it's literally like the light bulb goes on. It's like the Matrix. I'm alive now. I've never seen this. And then because what happens is they see a potential road, and it may be the first deal, maybe the second or third deal, but they see that, oh my gosh, I can leave my great job. I'm making a lot. Maybe I'm making $1 million a year, but I could actually replace my income. I could replace my expenses, and I don't have to work for it, right? And Warren Buffett says, unless you learn how to make money when you sleep, you'll work until you die. And a lot of people, we're getting paid well, but it's a time for money trade.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And when you have so many reps, right? So many repetitions, it is one of those things that you start to recognize patterns and you start to see. And yes, when you start to realize that you can actually generate benefit, and usually that is through financial benefit in the beginning, and then you realize that financial benefit gives you more control over the most important asset that any of us have, which is time. And you can do that you can generate those financial resources without it being tied to your time. You start to go, wow, okay, how do I do more of this and as quickly as possible? So, yeah, man. So I also know that we kind of have to get to the going long final three, Bronson. We've talked about so many things. Actually, just really quickly, and I know you will talk about this here in just a second, but help us understand, how do you work with, or how do you serve other passive investors through Bronson Equity?
Yeah. So, Bronson Equity, we're a group. We have about 200 million in multifamily assets. We also, so we're doing stuff in growth markets, areas in the Sun Belt where we see population growth, job growth, income growth. We typically go after value add properties. common place we're working in, rents are $1,000. We know after we do a light renovation, about a $6,000 renovation, we can take rents to about $1,500. So we like those type of equations because we know that no matter what interest rates do, no matter what some of these other factors happen, we're going to do really well in those areas if we can just complete the process of doing those, the value add component of those deals. We also are involved in the ATM machine space. We've partnered with the 5th largest operator of ATMs in the country. We have a fund we open a few times a year, and we love that because that's provided probably the most consistent cash flow of any deal that I've seen, which has been great. Kind of a monthly cash flow for people. And then we also have some stuff we're doing outside of real estate where we're looking at some energy stuff. I've got a technology play in the oil and gas space that's a potential 100x or higher type of investment. I mean, obviously there's some risk involved in that, but so we always look at things I look at things of not just, what is the asset? It's really, what does it do for you, right? Like I don't love real estate. I love what real estate does for me, but I don't, I'm not committed. Like it's just every investment has its own profile. So it's important to think about what are the risks, what are the returns, what could go wrong, and every deal has risks. So you have to really consider that and look at all of those things. But I think as an investor, as you grow, even as a passive investor, you'll learn, you'll get comfortable with more things. We've had a lot of investors join us in other alternative assets as well.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, it was very similar, right? I started in real estate and then went to a number of different areas, as you know, and I'm a big fan of ATM stuff as well and energy space as well. And this is one of the things that you start to realize that as you grow as an investor, active or passive, is that what is the outcome that you're looking for? What is the lifestyle you're trying to, that you want to be able to build? And then how can these different investments help to support that along the way? So appreciate you giving us that. And then listen, I got to jump into the Going Long Final 3, but here's the thing, Bronson. I never ask any of our special guests, and you're our special guest today, any of the Going Long Final 3, unless you tell me that you're ready. So are you ready?
Okay, well, hold on. Okay, I'm ready now. I'm ready.
I knew that would be the case.
Yeah, I'm pretty ready most of the time.
This guy was born ready. I mean, you were born ready. Come on, you're getting ready to go to jump in the 38-degree ice tub.
Yeah, that's true. That'll be the next interview.
All right. Well, here we go. So we started with you over on the left coast. As you know, I'm from Columbus, Ohio originally, but I've been calling this side of the pond my home for the last 21 years. It's like amazing to even think that and say that. But I'd like to bring things over back this side of the pond. So help us understand, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited, and I know you visited over here a lot, you've been talking about it already, or it's still on your bucket list to visit? What's that one city?
Man, I really have a hard time with this. You said that people have a hard time with, because they haven't traveled. I've traveled to a lot of European places and it's hard to pick just one. I mean, I've got a lot of them. So I'll stick with kind of a classic one. I really like London is a really cool city just because of the British Museum is awesome. There's a lot of just kind of classic looking areas and things about London that are just really fun. I mean, Paris is obviously another one, just some of the beauty there. And then I also, there's some smaller places I like too. So I'm going to be non-committal in my answer and say I like everything. I like them all. All of the above, Billy. I like them all.
That's not one of the
answers. I'm in Europe,
man.
I'm happy. Yeah. Okay, London.
We'll go with London. Right? We'll go with London. You're a nice guy. You'll go with London. Okay, that's cool. We'll go with London. That'll be in the show notes. So London it is. Question number 2 really has a lot to do with things that I've actually seen and experienced firsthand, Bronson, with a lot of people who are extremely successful, right? I consider you to be someone who's very successful. You're making a positive impact on so many different lives across the globe. And hopefully you would agree with me, right? Because one of the things that I've seen, especially with really successful people, is that they, unlike most people, Bronson, whenever they put a plan together, they go out, they execute the plan, and then what they do differently than everyone else is they execute the plan perfectly the very first time, which allows them to go even back. Sorry about that. No, I'm just kidding.
You okay? You go faster or slower?
Bronson, you're so nice, man. You're so nice. No, this is just a little light humor. Of course, they don't do things perfectly the first time. You deal with a lot of successful people. Come on. It could happen every once in a while, but it's not the norm, right? It's not the norm.
Yeah.
Here's the reality. Those individuals who are successful typically are making, 20, 50 times more mistakes, learning opportunities than most people because they're trying things so much more frequently, right? So the first part was just kind of a joke. I like to have a little bit of fun here, but this is very serious. In that, every single time that I've noticed that really successful people do things and they have a learning opportunity, they make a mistake, and it's a relevant one. Every single time, they stop, they learn from the mistake, and then what they do after that is pretty amazing. Every single time they put different strategies, tactics, and actions in place to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening again. So I don't want you to think about the mistake or dwell on that part, but what's the one lesson that you know that the Going Long family needs to hear today that you paid full price for and you want to help that person maybe today not pay full price for anything?
That's a great question, man. There's a couple things come to mind. One is there's a great book, Before You Quit Your Job by Robert Kiyosaki. And it talks about like the entrepreneur mindset is, I can't make any mistakes because you'll get fired, right? You make too many mistakes as an employee, you will get fired. As an entrepreneur, you have to make a lot of mistakes. You've got to be willing to do it. And then you quickly learn, right? So you got to be comfortable with that. But I wanted to actually share this. The biggest mistake that I made early on in my investing career, I wasn't doing this. This was years ago. I did this options trading strategy, and I made maybe $20,000 in 4 or 5 months. And then I had a loss in one day of $70,000. And my net worth at the time was about 200 or 250. It was a lot of my net worth. Very painful, right? Very hard to even acknowledge. But from that, I learned that I'm not a good options trader, right? That I have other strengths. And so I think not only do you learn from it, make sure it doesn't happen, you actually transform it. So I think when I share the story, hopefully it releases people from shame. I know people that are very successful that have lost over $1 million on a single deal. And they're some of the people that I respect the most in the investing industry, right? So, losses or challenges, whatever, they're not defining. They're things we can transform into, oh, okay, I learned this. It's like when we go to school, but it happened one day or happened in one deal, right? So you can learn from it. It can continue to teach you. So I don't look at anything as a failure. I look at all as growth and learning.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah. And do the things that you understand and try and stay away from the stuff that you don't. So appreciate that. Bronson, last question. And this is really about how we can help to feed the mind. I know this is something that's dear to your heart, and this is going to be difficult, just as difficult as the first of the Going Long final 3. But can you help us by recommending just one book to the Going Long family today? What's that one book that you'd recommend?
So I realized a while ago that, when I started to have a breakthrough in my personal development, that it would lead to a breakthrough in my business or lead to a breakthrough in just my ability of what I think is possible. And so one of the authors that's impacted me the most, her name is Brené Brown, and she wrote a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. So this is not a business book. This is a personal development book. It's about 150 pages. I think everybody should read it. I read 75 books a year. This is probably number one on my list that I recommend and probably my favorite book of all time. So it's like such a good book about entering into just your story, not letting, even just like the story I shared about not having shame over going through something challenging. And really, how do you live a more wholehearted life? How do you live a life of gratitude? How do you live from a place of you're really alive? You allow yourself to experience joy and just to live the wholeness of life. So if anybody has read that book or is interested, please reach out to me because I love that book.
All right, fantastic. We'll leave it in the show notes. So don't worry, everybody. If you're running, if you're driving, if you're cooking, don't worry. We'll have a very easy link and click and you can get Brené Brown's book. Listen, Bronson, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. And think about from the very beginning, you talk about, high salary, over $200,000 a year. You're living the life. You're trading time for money. You have an uncle that recognizes, hey, listen, he's doing a lot of stuff. He seems to have a lot of time freedom. How can you enter into that? He gives you some ideas of, doesn't have to just continue to do the single family stuff. You can go larger, using a lot of the same skill sets that you were using in your corporate career, being able to translate that, not having the fear to go from one location to another, continuing to add value to others, coaching, mentoring, and educating consistently. And so I know that you've already talked to us a little bit about it, but so many in the Going Long family is like, yeah, Billy, just get to the point. Ask him the question. Help us understand. How can we find out more about what it is that you're doing, Bronson, and more of the things you're doing at Bronson Equity?
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate you having me, Billy. This is awesome. I love this show. I love the concept of the show because it's just, it really helps people to become more passive. And so we work with passive investors. We have our deals. We also have, I mentioned that free download, which is how to use inflation to your advantage. Got a lot of great feedback on it. That's at bronsonequity.com. I'm also on social media, so I'd love to reach out to anybody, talk about investing or anything you want to connect on, but really appreciate you having me today.
All right. Fantastic. Well, listen, everybody, and also Bronson, really want to say thank you very much. Really appreciate you investing your time with me and the entire Going Long family today. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, man.
All right. And listen, Bronson, if you give me literally 30 seconds and we'll get you out of here. So Going Long family, listen, Bronson Hill just came, left so much value for you. Listen, take today's conversation, listen to it 2-3 times, bring family, bring friends, talk about the concepts that he's sharing, talked about the inflation, talked about making the transition from corporate to successfully leading his own business and educating others. And while you're doing that, while you're sharing with others, while you're learning, while you're going from theory to practice, I'll be here preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Trust that you enjoyed today's conversation. And once again, today's conversation was sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and want to find out more about how we're helping accredited investors to gain their personal freedom even faster, go to firstgencp.com/going long.